there, and welcome back to my channel where I make quality content that nobody really asked for. And today's video is actually a cosplay tutorial. I know it's kind of shocking because I keep saying like I made this channel originally for my costume making, and then stuff changed, things changed, and somehow this channel became my Miraculous Ladybug collecting channel. But yeah, I'm finally happy to finally start posting my cosplay related content on this channel because a lot of people actually ask how I make a lot of parts of my costume or just the whole costume in general. So I'm finally happy that I can finally post my tutorials here on YouTube, because if you don't know, I make a lot of costumes and I actually film almost the whole progress of almost all my newest costumes. I just never posted the videos for some reason, because when I post things, I like to wait for the perfect time, but sometimes the perfect time never happens, so sometimes you just gotta post it before it's too late. So that's what I'm doing right now. I filmed this tutorial a very long time ago. I filmed this all the way back when I was still in high school. I filmed it for my film class, so things a little bit different. That is why. But yeah, in today's video, you can't tell by the intro or whatever, or the title or the thumbnail, I'm showing you guys how I make my Viking medallions, because that's like the #1 thing I feel like people ask for on my Instagram, is how I make my medallions, because I did the Lightfury from How to Train Your Dragon, and that was inspired by a lot of things, and I have these Viking medallions that kind of inspire what Hiccup and Astrid wears in their wedding outfits, and people ask all the time how I make them because they look so good, and a lot of people actually struggle making those medallions for some reason because they think they had to like 3D print it or do some whack tricks or whatever. My Viking medallions process is actually very easy, so that's why I'm making this tutorial for you guys. So yeah, in this tutorial I'm showing you guys how to make my Viking medallions. So I'm very excited about that. Like I said, check out my Instagram because that's where you can see all my stuff, and you can see my Lightfury costume on there, and you can see all those medallions that I work on. But yeah, so I'm just going to show you guys how I made those medallions. And the #1 thing you need for this video, like the main material that I make my Viking medallions out of, is EVA foam, which is crafting foam. So yeah, I use 4mm foam for the base of the medallions, and I use 2mm foam for the detailings. The difference is basically the thickness. The 4mm one is thicker, so that way it says the base, and the 2mm one is really thin, so that's why I like using for detailing, because it's easier to cut out and stuff like that. So that's all you need to know for this tutorial. So let's just dive right in and see how I make my Viking medallions.
You also need some sort of cement glue, like contact cement or rubber cement. I'm using rubber cement for this project. You also need a hot glue gun, 3D paint or puffy paint, a pencil, paper, paint brushes, a ruler, scissors, parchment paper, a Sharpie, googly eyes, a box knife, and if you're making your medallions round, something to trace with. The first step in making medallions is sketching out your design. Here I am tracing the cups and lids that are around my house so I can have a perfect circle to work on, because most medallions are circular. I recommend, if you're doing a piece with multiple medallions, like a belt, I recommend doing multiple shaped medallions. Here I'm sketching out a rectangular shaped one with my ruler. After we have the shapes of our medallions down, it's time to sketch out your design. You can sketch out your design however you like, but for these medallions I'm making, they're going to be based around the character Stormfly from How to Train Your Dragon, but you can do whatever you like. My last medallions were based off the characters the Lightfury and Toothless from How to Train Your Dragon. time to grab your parchment paper and rip a piece that's big enough to cover your paper. Then we go get our parchment paper and put it on top of the paper that have our design of our medallions on it. Then you want to trace your design onto that parchment paper because this is going to be our pattern when we do our foam work. Now you want to start cutting your medallions. But for right now, just make sure you just cut the shape of your medallion and not the detailing. Now you want to grab your 4mm foam, which is the thicker foam, and this is going to be our base for medallions. I recommend that if you make your medallion circular, just use the lid and cup that you use to trace your pattern, just because it will just be a little bit more rounder. But if you did not make your medallion circular, just get your pattern piece that you drew and cut out and just trace it onto the foam. Since I'm using a box cutter to cut my foam, I placed it on a dining mat that I got from the dollar store so it would protect my table from being cut with the knife. I recommend having a surface or something underneath your foam when you're cutting so your surface won't get all scratched up. I'm using a box cutter to cut the foam pieces, and make sure you use a box cutter, not a scissor, because the scissor will be harder to cut and be a little bit more choppy. Honestly, this is the hardest part of doing a medallion, is cutting the foam pieces. This next part is completely optional and you do not have to do it. But I am grabbing my Dremel tool and I'm putting it together to sand down the rough edges of my foam, just because I use a very dull box cutter knife and that caused my foam to be very choppy and a little bit rough, so I'm just smoothing it down a little bit. But you do not have to do this step if you do not have a Dremel or sandpaper to use. And since I Dremel my pieces, I'm just grabbing my heat gun and I'm just heat sealing my foam. But you don't have to do this either. Now going back to your parchment paper, now start cutting out your design. For example here, I'm just cutting out the dragon design that I did, and I'm cutting it into pieces like a puzzle piece, because when I trace it onto the foam and put it back together, you'll see more of the detailing. With the parchment paper pieces that we cut out, we're going to transfer those pieces onto the 2mm foam, and from there we're going to trace every single piece. After you're done tracing your pattern, you're just going to cut out the 2mm foam. Make sure you cut out the 2mm foam because that's the thinner one. And because it's thin, you can use a scissor to cut out the pieces. Now gather all your foam pieces and grab your rubber cement or contact cement glue and start gluing the 2mm foam pieces onto the 4mm piece. Make sure you read the directions on the glue. Wait a few moments before gluing the foam. The glue should be tacky before you put it on. It is very important that you use the glue I said to use, because if you use like Elmer's glue or hot glue, it will cause the foam pieces to look lumpy and not as smooth. So make sure you also are in a very well ventilated room when doing this also. This part is also optional, but I'm just grabbing my X-Acto knife and I'm just doing little detailing works onto the foam, just because I'm just a little bit extra. Now we're going to do the border part of our medallion, which is the thing that's around the foam. So you want to grab your foam. You can use the 2mm foam or the 4mm foam. It just depends which one would be easier for you. I'm using the 2mm foam. I'm just tracing my medallion on top of the foam. Now go and cut that foam piece. And since I used the 2mm foam, I'm going to fold it in half and cut a smaller circle in the middle. And I'm just going to hot glue that piece on top. Now we're going to grab our googly eyes and we're going to glue them on top of that border piece we just did with hot glue. I know they might look a little silly right now, but after we paint them, they're going to add such cool detailing to our medallions. Then you want to grab your 3D paint or your puffy paint because we're going to do the detailings on the border now. I just sketched out my design of the detailing that I wanted on my border, and then I went on top of that with the 3D paint. You don't have to do the 3D paint, you could use hot glue for this part, but I used hot glue on my last medallions. Even though that worked fine, the glue was hard to control and I burned myself a lot doing that. So the 3D paint is just safer and a little bit easier to control. Now that we're done with the detailing, I'm grabbing my black acrylic paint and I'm going to paint the whole medallion black. This is going to be our base coat and our base color. We're painting it all black to give it a nice even surface so when we paint the silver paint on top of it, it will look better and cleaner. When the black base color is dry, I'm grabbing my silver metallic paint. And the painting technique I'm going to be doing is dry painting. So that means I'm going to get a little bit of paint on my brush and I'm gently going to paint on the silver paint onto the medallion. We're doing this because when we dry paint, it will give it a more realistic metal look. This part is also optional, but I'm also weathering my medallion, so I'm just grabbing my black acrylic paint and I'm watering it down. And then with that watered down paint, I'm just painting areas of my medallion where I think should be a little bit more weathered. Kind of like shading. It really helps bring out your detailing in your medallion too. So I just get the wet paint and just put it on there and I dab it with a napkin. And after that, we are done with our medallions. And if you're wondering how I attach my medallions to my costume, all I did was get some Velcro and felt, and I hot glue Velcro and felt on the back, and I just attach it around all my jewelry pieces, and it came out really well. And I said, if you want a closer look of my Lightfury cosplay or any of my costumes, just let me know down below, and I can do like a cosplay breakdown on how I made everything else in this costume. So just let me know, and I'd love to make that